tell my friends stand by me only if I'm right. I come out of triple darkness just to see the light. If I say it once, I guarantee I say it twice. If they want me, I ain't going out without a fight. In my dreams, I'm a killer, but for God, man. Try to play it cool, but it's getting hard, man. Rolling with the real and death to all the frauds, man. Not too many of me, yeah, it's kinda hard, man. In my room, sitting in my room. Know they waiting on me and I'm coming soon. Never been a sellout, never been a coon. Y'all be on the camera acting like I'ma show them how true and independent get it. Whole game changed by the time I'm finished with it. We about to get this business handled in a minute.
Welcome to the B2M Crew podcast. We're broadcasting from the Code Building in downtown Charlottesville. Wonderful co-working, office space available with wonderful amenities. We're excited to be here. One of our sponsors, great building. Come and check it out on the downtown mall in Charlottesville. Our podcast features 5 African-American men who have been friends for over 40 years. We share 13 children between us, 12 of them being sons, and have been married for a combined 100 years. Just coming to you talking about parenting primarily and giving you some ideas on not how we raise our children so you can do it that way, or not telling you what to do, but just how we did it and chopping it up about that. I'm joined to my right by John J.G. Yates, over in the middle, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, Talik Wynn. We got the world's ambassador, Charlottesville's unofficial mayor, Waukee, and brother Jay Moo over there on the side. And today we're going to be talking to you about a topic that's very serious, but something that, is a great information to share and discuss on what we taught our children about dealing with death, which is an inevitable reality for all human beings on this earth. So very important topic, kind of somber, but nevertheless something that we all have to deal with. So fellas, just in general, who'd like to chime in on some things that you kept first and foremost when teaching your children at any age about dealing with that inevitability?
Who wants to go first?
Waukee.
It's perfect that we actually started with this particular subject, and I, in particularly, wanted to wear this particular shirt for this topic. So, rest in peace, Devin Chandler, Deshaun Perry, and LaBelle Davis. We lost those 3 young men at the University of Virginia, football players, which is our local team. And, that was just an absolutely heartbreaking moment for the city and for people around the world and what happened with them with the shooting on the bus. And so I just wanted to, first of all, pay honor to them and just talk about, as we experienced that, what we experienced in this community as a loss. It was so devastating as a community. I remember that day where, they didn't quite know what a murderer was. And we, they had shut down schools and all that stuff that particular day. And so that was just a really challenging time, man. And to just see how the senseless violence touched our community, but to then have to have that conversation with our sons who are older now, they're in their 20s, they're men. But how that was just a really difficult challenge. I think about being in the game and just sitting, 30 feet from those guys, not too long ago and seeing them play. So that was just really, really tough. And so the biggest message that I tried to take away, because it makes no sense whatsoever. It makes no sense whatsoever. But it's like, man, this is what we're dealing with this again. We're dealing with this again. And I want to make sure, the point I want to make here is when these things happen, that we just don't turn the other page and treat it as, oh, well, just another thing, that we don't start to harden our hearts when things like this happen. Yeah, we can't become desensitized to moments like this. So whether it's a public thing that happened publicly or whether it happens internally within our own families, because violence touched many of our families as well. We want to make sure that when we have these conversations with younger people, that we don't harden our hearts and become desensitized to moments like this. and that we really, really, really take the time to go through the legitimate grieving process. And if people don't know and understand the 5 stages of grief, I would recommend
I was playing it around in my mind, like we got to talk about grief.
Yeah. The 5 stages of grief is real, because the denial. I remember when I first heard the news, it's total denial.
Right.
And you're like, no way, that didn't happen. We just, and then my son, they're familiar with the guys. And so you're like, that didn't happen. And then you get angry, the next stage. And so as you go through these stages, make sure that you go through them properly, because we don't want to get hung up, because that's when we start to develop, long-term issues, because we didn't go through all the stages of grief. So I would start with that.
You run it for the audience sake. What, like?
If you want me to, I got it.
Yeah, what was it? What denial? Anger.
2 for 2.
Bargaining.
3 for 3.
Depression.
4 for 4.
And acceptance.
5 for 5.
Okay, all
Crack
right.
it out.
So instead of, just for the record, instead of going to Google, I could have just asked Joaquin.
Well, no, I wasn't sure if I could just reel it off like that.
Denial, anger, you said what
Bargaining.
was it? Bargaining,
Depression,
and
then
acceptance. I think that's a good launch point, because in telling someone how to deal with it, it's the acknowledgement of grief is a thing, right?
Yeah.
And that there are stages. And one of the things I always keep in mind, and I do try to share with my sons through modeling and through talk, is everyone deals with death differently. Right. And sometimes we get caught up with, she's not even crying.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Or
What does it look like?
the funeral's coming up, they in the back playing. And you might be the one that's so in the hole that you particularly, why is nobody else feeling like I feel?
We saw that on Good Time.
That is, we did see that.
Oh my gosh, there we go.
Was that on Good Time?
That was the damn episode.
With Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she was just trying to be so
Yeah,
busy.
she's trying to hold it together and moving around.
Yeah.
Then they hit her.
JJ, everybody was upset, like,
I'm trying to figure out,
The
they were
most
young.
iconic moment of Good Times of TV history for
Yeah.
us, because for all of us that didn't grow up with our biological fathers, our father James had died. Right? James was right, but that's real talk. But dealing with, recognizing everybody has their own process and not judging it. Like death, we get to own how we deal with death as individuals. And one question I was gonna pose this to James, when we think about it, like kind of before we talk about the advice. What was your first experience in dealing with death, James, and how did that inform how you view it today?
It's funny you asked that, because I was sitting here thinking, I was like, mine that I can recall, at least vividly, was my grandmother on my mother's side when she passed, and how that kind of affected me. You know what I mean? And when I was told, and I think I was at my auntie's house over in I forgot the name of those apartments, but anywho, and I think at the little park over there, and I'm not sure if my cousin came and told me, but I was kind of devastated, and just like, I guess, kind of going through those stages, like, not believing it. And I'm trying to think if the family kind of had us, nowadays it's like, if you have like elderly people that's in either sick or in the hospital or something like that, and the doctor will tell you, oh, it's time to bring the family in. It wasn't like that back in the, say back in the day.
Right.
What was that, 80s, 70s, late 70s, 80s. And so it was just like this news that came, where I guess I felt a little kind of bothered that it just, that we weren't given that opportunity to just kind of, be around my grandmother before. It's just one day she's here and the next day telling that she's gone, and you know what I'm saying, and dead. So it's like, so that was my earliest and the first experience that I recall. And so, yeah, it was just.
What would it be important for you to teach, your young men today?
To do that, to have them involved even in the stages, in the stages of if they're sick or, or ill in some sort of way, to where if they're deteriorating or whatever the case may be, just kind of let them be a part of that process to, I think make it, I wouldn't say easier, but a little better and more acceptable, because you kind of see and you're a part of, as you said, that inevitability.
Yeah.
In the process that, grandma, grandpa, whoever, auntie, great auntie, or whoever is getting, not well, organs shutting down. So,
Right.
they may not be here much longer, or so on and so forth.
Right.
One of the important things I do want to pass on to is with that of the medical piece, and they call comfort care and that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
is to not go by that in every case or scenario. You know what I mean? Because
What do you mean the comfort care? You talking about like
Hospice.
being in hospice?
exactly.
You
That's
mean
what I
when
was
you
about to
say
get to.
not go by that, you mean don't necessarily just automatically put your
Accept
people in it?
exactly, accept
Okay.
that, because the few instances that I do recall, as an adult though, was when my uncle passed, Uncle Doc. Shout out.
Rest in peace, Doc.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
He, it was, we were there in the process when he was, wasn't well, and you can kind of see, and it's the same with grandma, with Nanny. You know what I'm saying? You can see where they become emaciated and deathly looking. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Whereas then when they recommend that, I can, I'm saying, I'm kind of with it, because hey, I don't know the pain or whatever my uncle felt, or Nanny at the time, but when they become that at that point to where you can kind of see death
Mhm.
on them, okay, I'm more apt to agree and go with that, as opposed to when, like with my father, oh my gosh, that's something that bothers me now because that was so fresh. In 2020.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And so he wasn't at that point. And when somebody pulled the trigger on that, man, that had me heated.
Yeah.
But anyway, so in that example, but as far as one, but then the other on the side of my wife's grandmother, she passed the same year in 2020, and it wasn't long after my father had passed in January that her grandmother was in the hospital, and they were saying, oh, she's not doing well. You want to bring the family and all that and everything, right? And then they a few days, maybe I think in a week that she was in the hospital, and they said yeah, we could, we're gonna put her, we suggest hospice, and we'll give her about, probably a few days, maybe a week at the longest, that that she'll be around. I believe it's someone that I know in the nursing field that says when they do that and they just they're going to administer them that morphine like daily or whatever.
Yeah.
That's how they can tell, give you a day. Well, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because they're counting on that administration of that morphine, basically just killing people, euthanizing them, basically in essence.
Yeah,
if
because
they're
usually
not,
when they do that, they also remove all the medications that were sustaining them and all
exactly.
of that.
And
Yeah.
so they're just
Yeah.
straight, slowly just killing them. And again, I get that if they're at that age. Grandma, she wasn't my wife's grandmother. She was not at that.
Yeah.
And so and knowing what I know and with my father and everything, I not that they were just listening to me alone. I said no, don't let them do the. I say if they whatever hospice care they do, they want, and then plus they was all in agreement to let her come home, and in whatever hospice they were going to send over or have, it'd be very limited. It wasn't the administration of morphine or anything like that. She lived for another 6 months.
Wow.
When he's talking about giving her a week at the most, and the family took care of her.
Yeah.
The family was there to just do what they needed to do.
Yeah.
I think
That's real.
I think when they at the time, towards that 6-month period when we could kind of see she was in pain and that sort of thing, they did allow them to administer a little, not whatever they was talking about giving. And that's what they was like, well, how much would you normally get? And they was like at a particular dose and amount that they did. But, that's not necessarily particular out. It's just, then became somewhat of a natural, more of a natural piece.
What's interesting about that is, and most of our elderly people, they want to pass at home.
Right.
They don't want to be in any facility. They want to be at home around loved ones. So, unfortunately, I know when my wife's grandmother passed, probably around, it was shortly after the pandemic as well. I don't know if that was 2020 or not. I can't remember the exact year. But you know, a lot of the decisions in the hospitals are made for insurance purposes and stuff like that. Like those doctors are told you can't keep them here based on insurance. They pay, you know, they're making financial decisions in a lot of cases.
Right.
And when they decide to let them get up out of here, or the doctor's just like, I'm tired of dealing with this. They're not gonna make it back, and not even thinking necessarily about the comfort if they got some more time.
But another,
at
I
home.
didn't mean to cut you off, but another point is sometimes the patient themselves, you know, is not doing necessarily what, I mean, of course, when they're at the doctor office, they gonna give them what they supposed to
Right,
give them.
right.
But the patient themselves is not doing what they supposed to do. And so sometimes they like, you know what, you ain't doing what you supposed to do. This is what I'm thinking. You ain't doing what you supposed to do. I'm gonna give this kidney or this liver, whatever, to somebody who is doing what they doing.
They got an opinion about it instead of
that's just my personal belief.
no, that's it. And Joaquin and so my point about that is make sure that you are talking to those doctors and that they have a better explanation for you than it doesn't look good. You know what I'm saying? Because they'll try to get you out of there with any information if you don't ask questions. But I want to probe you and Talik a little bit because I know y'all lost your father when you were young, adolescents. And so I'm going to start with Talik because I want to talk about the impact on a child's brain and mind in dealing with death before we can talk about what you got to be thinking about, right?
Right.
So how do you recall receiving that information and how did it initially affect you when you lost somebody so important in your life?
For me, it was a lot of different emotions. You know, and the way when my mom told us, my brother and we was all sitting on the picnic bench and she told us, and you know, they were wondering if I was really, you know, I was 9 years old, so they was wondering like, did Talik really understand what just took place? And I was like, yeah, you know, but I dealt with it different. But my grandfather used to work in the morgue at the hospital, and that's where they do. I guess they do a lot of studies and stuff with.
It was in the medical school. Jordan Hall, where the medical school.
Oh, okay.
Where the students went in there to practice on
the
cadavers.
Yeah.
And so I was literally like 5 years old, and I remember like walking down this dark hallway, and it used to be like glass, you know, and it used to be like babies in jars. And I remember when I, you know, it was just all kind of like unreal stuff
like some old horror
that I
was.
But I remember this, and so I think that's how I became fast too. I used to take off sprinting because the hallway was dark, and then it used to
that'll make you run if you see a baby.
It used to light up. But what happened was when I was exposed to death at a very, very young age. Now, of course, that's not none of my loved ones, but I'm not really as scared because, you know, I mean, that's like 4 years until my father passed. So I remember my grandfather like go over there and open up the trash can because I wanted to throw something away, and it was a trash can full of brains and hearts and stuff like that because they were doing all these studies. And so I seen this, you know, pulling them out the vault with the toe tag. I seen all this, and I was just a little kid. So, you know, when people speak about death to me, you know, even though I didn't have the spiritual piece, it didn't really. I had almost started to get a level of numb to it.
Yeah,
because I've experienced
it happens
and seen it so much. So when my mom told me that of course I knew my pops was sick, you know. I mean, you know, so we always seen all that. So when she told me, I was like, all right. And I told myself immediately, I was like, I'll see him again one day, you know, at 9. And it was like, okay, maybe you do understand, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but some of the things that took place in my mind that nobody knew. And I ain't told some of this stuff until recent. And I mean, it's, you know, and this only like a handful of people.
Yeah.
But never wanted to harm myself, but always thought about suicide. Because I was like, how can I spend time with my father? You know? And I was like, well, first of all, I'm not about to hurt myself.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I love life too much, right? But at the same time, if I go with him, I can't be with my mother.
And this was as a 9-year-old.
This is at a 9-year-old.
Wow.
Man, that is a
logical.
powerful
Yeah, that's heavy.
thought. I mean,
Yeah.
like, because it's real. Like, at that innocence, you like, I want to go too.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, dang, I miss Pops. I want to be there. I want to spend time with him. And then I was like, man, I'm not hurting myself, you know?
Yeah.
And so the thought didn't stay long.
Yeah.
But
But it
One-
crossed your mind because
It crossed your mind. And so
Yeah.
that's why I challenge parents to, you know, I understand that they might be going through it, but, you know, make sure your kids well
Paying attention
surrounded
to them
and,
babies.
and talk to them. And then actually bring it up to them. Because when you expose them, there's no secret no more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so those type of things help when you expose them. Now, at the same time, you gotta know your kid because you don't want to be planting the seed in our head either. At the same time,
What do you mean by that? Like, as far as-
yeah, I'm gonna tell you. Like, you know, I'm a Christian, so I believe life and death in the power of the tongue. And so when people speak things, whether it's positive or negative, you know, those type of things right there, you know, you're planting seeds, whether you want them to be planted or not, you know. But anyway, you're planting seeds. And so what I was saying to reflect on that was I wanted to make sure, or I want the audience to make sure that they're not planting a bad seed to, you know, oh man, that might be a good idea to go kill myself or harm myself.
Yeah.
Well, you know, once you kill yourself, I mean, of course, if you believe all, you know, whatever your religious principles, those things gonna take place.
Yeah.
But at the same time, man, you know, so that's what I meant when I said
Yeah, I
planting
got you,
those
got
type of seeds.
Powerful. And Joaquin, you were
I was 11.
you were a little older.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
again, what did you go
For
through, bro?
me, man, it was you know, you see as you're going up to this moment, because our father was sick, and I don't think I really thought he was really gonna pass away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in my mind, I didn't
The
think
denial.
he was.
Right.
But I remember this is one thing I do remember. Like right before he did pass away, they took us in to see him, and you know the oxygen had gotten under his skin, so it was like looked like a
Oh, wow.
balloon. And so I realized in that moment, I'm like, yo, I wish I had not seen that.
Yeah.
You know,
the
I
image of that.
didn't need to see that.
Right.
You know, but you know, during that time, I was like, okay, you know, it happened. But the moment you talk about when mom comes to deliver this message to me and my brother, it was a tough moment for a split second. And then my mom said something that I have taken with me for the
Yeah.
rest of my life. And she just put her arm around me and my brother and was like, it's gonna be okay. Everything gonna be all right.
Yep.
And in that moment, that's what I realized. When you're going through something like this, young people just need reassurance
Right.
that everything is going to be okay.
Yeah.
So the number one thing I think when you have to share news like this with young people is to say everything is going to be okay. Reassure them because their world has been shaken. And now the one thing they need when their world has been shaken is stability. And so if they can get a calming voice to come into their life
Yeah.
and say, I know grandma, grandpa, brother, sister, whoever is gone,
Yeah.
but I can assure you everything is going to be okay.
I'm gonna add to that.
And that was
what
big
you
for
did,
us.
when you said that, the other part of what you said though was saying it's gonna be okay, but put her arms around you.
Yes.
Right.
Let them
Embrace
feel
us.
it. You understand
Absolutely.
what I'm saying?
Physical
Yeah.
reassurance.
And
Yeah.
you
Along with
know,
the
in
word.
Yeah.
retrospect, you know, I'm like, I don't even know if she believed that
Yeah.
at the time.
Hey.
Because
She
she's
will.
31. My
Yeah.
dad was 29.
Yeah.
You know, and so it didn't matter whether she believed it.
It didn't.
When she said it, I
You
believed
believed
it.
it,
Yeah.
right?
And
And that's what I needed.
And
Right.
to reflect on that, her father planted a seed in her, telling her that, hey, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Like we got
Knowing
these
she
boys.
got to come deliver us this
That's
news.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
you gotta do
you
it.
know, hey, we gonna do whatever it takes to make sure these boys are right.
Yeah.
And then to reflect on that, the village, man,
Yes.
the community.
Yeah.
I mean, man, the
Aunts,
community.
uncles, grandparents.
I mean, people
everybody.
still come to us to this day, man. And mom shared with us that, you know, her champions in her corner that stepped in that, you know, when things was, you know, tough at times, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Man, I think
Wow.
that's so powerful because a lot of times as parents, because of the hustle and bustle and our own emotions, you know, we gotta be in the right spirit when we talk to our children about certain things, right? And we can't talk at them like, because we got this, you know, we're gonna talk a little bit later about this so-called toughness. Because to say it's gonna be all right without the love and caring and the hugging, that's not gonna do it.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? Because that's not gonna do it. And that's some powerful testimony. And John, same thing, man. You know, what's your first interaction with death in that way, or what you share with your kids, or one of the most impactful deaths that you dealt with before?
Yeah, well, when we first started this, my first thought was death is a part of life, right? It's a cycle of life. And I was looking at it two different ways, right? So a natural death versus tragic, right?
Mm.
With the UVA shootings. So it's two different type of things, right?
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
And both still have to be handled. But my first thought is it's a natural part of life. If my kids going to weddings, they going to funerals, right? And so my first funeral was my great aunt Sally. And I never forget sitting beside my cousin Gary. And you know, Aunt Sally wasn't very old at the time, but that was my first funeral. Nobody talked about it, but we knew she was sick, right? But as far as with the kids, again, that's the cycle of life and death. And God willing, our kids bury us, right? And we don't bury any of our children,
Right.
right? And so, but on the flip side of that, you know, when you talk about your belief and your spirituality, the happiest funeral I ever went to. Some people say, man, I want to have a party at my funeral, this, that, the other. Our great grandmother, right? And she was in her 90s, mid to late 90s, and she wasn't sick very long. And she was such an awesome, strong woman, you know what I mean? So fun, loving, stern, disciplined, super personality. But that was the only happy funeral I've been to, you know? It was a real celebration. People talk about that, but that was a happy funeral for me, from my perspective, you know? Again, and that's part of life, right? And so how do you honor and you love and respect your elders? And that's how it's supposed to go down, you know? And then we have the tragedies, right?
Right.
Like the UVA shooting, the mass shooting in Charlottesville, these senseless murders that's been happening, right? So now I'm dealing with those is completely different for me anyway than dealing with someone who's in their 70s or 80s, right? And so you have the senseless
How about
shooting.
we use 80s and 90s?
80s, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, man, it's part of life. You want to teach them how to be. It's, you know, it's a natural thing. But then those are again the tragic things: the shooting, senseless violence, you know, car accidents. Some things you can't control. You know, those are tragic things when you guys lost your father. And I don't know what makes anything. I don't know if even saying easy is the better word, but like I knew when my grandmother, I knew she was sick and I knew she was on her way out. You know, and it kind of helped me dealt with the grieving process because I knew it was coming. You know, and she lived an excellent life as well, you know. But so you guys were young. Do you think that because your father was ill, did that make it easier? Not easy, not the word I'm
Honestly,
looking
man,
for,
I think it's,
You probably
to
gonna
be
say what
honest,
I'm saying.
I think it's way easier to lose a parent at a young age.
Yeah.
Because when you're 9, 10, 11, 12, you don't know what you're losing.
Mm-hmm.
When you 50
Great
years
point.
old and you lose your
Yeah.
parent,
Wow.
you know exactly what you're
That's a
losing.
good
Right.
point.
That
Right.
impact is heavy on
Yeah.
you as an adult, you know,
Right.
to lose someone older. So like people always think, oh, the little kid's gonna be fine in a few weeks.
Yeah,
For
in fact,
real.
if they under 8,
Yeah,
they might
yeah.
not even remember the person.
Exactly. So I
Yeah.
think, you know, the impact of it when you are older, you know what you're losing.
Right.
So it is much more devastating.
That's back to
you.
your point, though, that at that age, what's important is to let them know it's going to be okay, because that's the only thing you don't know.
Right. Exactly.
It's not going to be okay.
I think for me, I don't know. I just take a lot of things different. But for to raise your point, for me, I think the relationship you build on earth, with no regrets,
Right.
I'm telling them that I love them. I'm telling them that I'm coming over to see you, and I'm living up to my commitment. And so many people through life make all these promises and don't deliver on them. But when someone died that is your go-to, and a lot of times, maybe that matriarch or patriarch in the family, your go-to, but at the same time, if you build into people and stuff like that, and you let them know, then I think the sting for me personally is not as hard, because I'm like, yo, I love them to the fullest while they were here. I talked to them, so when they pass, I ain't regret. I'm not scared to go in this room because they died in the room. Like,
Right, get all spooky.
Yeah, it's like
use that piece with that
all that
relationship.
slave.
and so I think what happens is, because you were so mean and cruel to this person, now you're regretting.
You think the ghost coming to get him?
You think the ghost. That's what And
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I want to, one of the things I think about is we making some important distinctions with the tragedy versus someone ill, and stuff like that. Like my earliest recollection, of course, if I can remember, I got one of those memories that goes back to like 5 or something like that. So I can remember flashes of relatives dying that you didn't really know that well.
Right.
And so really in those situations, for me, it was more just like, oh, wow, that's a thing. Like, I wonder this, I wonder that, just to yourself. And It's almost like when you're not close to the person, it's almost like you're experiencing death from the outside looking in.
Right. Exactly.
You like watching it. You watching the funeral. Oh, what is this? Like as a kid, you're like, oh, they jumping up and down. Oh, we eating afterwards. It's like you don't really. Oh,
Yeah.
People are crying. I see my mama cry. I remember trying to fake a tear one time. I'm just because I saw my mama
Right.
crying.
That's what you're supposed to do.
I was in the 5th grade and she was like, "Your grandfather died." I wasn't really close to, but it was my mom's dad. He had spent some time living with us, and I was like, just. I didn't know much about it. I was like, so what? Ask a couple questions, but then I have to say, from 5th grade up until high school, I never experienced somebody close to me dying. And I'm about to point y'all to something that changed my life, and I think changed our community life. Shout out and rest in peace to Ron Sheffield.
Yeah.
I knew you would bring that up.
I know everybody in Charlottesville
yeah.
know the great
Yeah.
chef, man, who I don't even know anybody that had a problem with Ron Sheffield. He was the type of brother that, even though I had older brothers, when you're in a freshman in high school and you come in the lunchroom, you trying to figure out where to sit. And he was a dude that was like, even if you was an insignificant 9th grader, man, what you looking around for? This the table.
Yeah.
Come sit at the table, man. You know what I mean?
Yes, he
Embrace you. He was that dude, right?
For sure.
And just a great guy, man, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not saying he was closer to many more people than I, but he made everybody feel like they were close to him.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And so when he was murdered down at
Bowie State. Oh,
no, we were down in
That was in
Buckingham,
Buckingham.
Sand the Beach from the East
Was
playing
it Harvey?
at Harvey's.
I think I'm not sure.
Something like that. But anyway, he was tragically murdered, and I know everybody around here remember that. To me, his death was a message to an entire generation of people, because there were so many people that loved him that were personally hurt by that act of violence, right? And that was the first time I was affected by death.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? And
Right.
that I was like questioning life and didn't understand what it meant and all of those things. And now as an older man, I recognize that in some ways I feel that God allowed his life to be taken to save a lot of people in our generation, because I know for me, it wasn't a fear after that of partying or hanging out. It was taking life more seriously.
Right.
And his death caused me to take life more seriously and to think about life more seriously. And so that was when I started to understand that there were lessons in death. You understand what I'm
Right.
saying? And that there was a bigger picture when it came to death. And so now as an adult, one of the things, the Bible says that there's a time and a season for everything.
Right.
Yep. A time to kill.
The Holy
time to
Quran
steal,
says everything
So-
else passes away except for the person of your Lord. Like the only permanent reality is God, is the creator. Everything else is temporary, right? And so that was one of the things when you talk about it's a life cycle. The first thing that you promise when you born, the one thing that you guaranteed to happen in your life is you're going to die,
Yeah. Right.
right? And that's what I taught my son. I ain't teach him like that direct like that,
Right.
but to teach them that concept. Like it's things die. You see the seasons change and flowers die and animals die, right? That this is a reality that you have to accept and not let impact your trajectory and take the lesson, because you have to look at the bigger picture, else you're gonna get so caught up in your emotion that you'll never move forward. And some people never recover from deaths.
Yeah.
Or
Real
people
correct.
dying.
Real quick before you get too far away from the
Yeah.
example you gave, thinking back, did we have like the grief counseling and stuff like they have now? When something happens to
Nah,
students
not
in
that
I
I'm
school.
remember
aware.
at school they told us we could talk to some people if we wanted to, but I don't
I
I was
The
trying
guidance
to
counselor, but they
remember
probably
if
wouldn't-
we had
Yeah.
that
We
in
wasn't
place
relating
back
to
then.
that.
Nah.
Yeah.
I don't
remember.
recall it
Man,
anyway.
the one thing I want to say, when Ron lost his life, that happened to us
Yeah,
as a group, is from the moment that happened, and it changed us completely.
yeah,
That was the moment when we began to tell each other that we loved each other.
yeah.
And that's the one thing I am so thankful that we developed that
Yeah,
at 17 years old
right.
amongst ourselves, is that we started to say, hey man, I love you.
Yeah,
And it allowed us, that lesson allowed us to then start to express how we felt about one another.
yeah.
And I
yeah.
truly believe because we expressed the way we felt about one another at 17, 18, 19, that's why we sitting right here at 51.
Yeah, man.
That's
and
why we sitting right here now at this age,
and man,
because we took that lesson during
and
that
his
time.
parents, man. Shout out to
Shout
Mr.
out,
and Miss Sheffy.
And Tania,
And
too.
I want them to know, man, that they lost a precious gift back then, man. And I want them to know that his death changed a lot of young people
Absolutely.
and was not in vain.
Absolutely.
Because I never on January the 1st go without thinking about Ron Sheffy.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
That's true.
And in fact, I'm more apt to spend my New Year's in reflection than I am thinking about partying like that because of that to this day, man.
Yep.
And but that's awesome. So I want to just bring us back, man, and remind you this is the B2M Crew podcast, and that we're down here in the Code Building in downtown Charlottesville, where we record the podcast monthly and bring you into our lives and some of these stories. And so we're grateful to the Code Building, this wonderful space for small businesses and people looking for spaces and special meetings. We definitely thankful to partner with them on this, man. This most somber topic of dealing with death. So let's go a little deeper. So we talked about a lot, some experiences, and we talked about some things we want people to keep in mind. And in terms of our processing of death, have any of your children had to deal with death? And what did you see them going through, and how they process it? And what are some reflections on any of that?
Yeah. A couple things. I'm gonna hit on two different angles, but my son, he's a journalist, and when I talk to him, and someone passed away, it just all depends on timing. Is even though you never can be prepared for it, but or so to speak, but timing is everything. So there's been several situations that people has passed away, and I'll wait to tell him because he might be doing a newscast or something like that, and I don't want to I don't know how it's going to affect him
Right,
personally.
right.
So I don't want it to penetrate, and I want him to be able to still deliver. So that's one thing that happens. But
So that points out timing, the
Timing,
importance
yeah,
of timing.
timing.
correct, exactly.
Yeah.
So timing, and my son's situation, and that's what I do. I'm not gonna send him. Some people nowadays, I mean, they'll send you a text message and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we need to talk about people finding out people lost their lives on Facebook.
Facebook.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Your aunt or uncle done passed away, and you
Right.
discover it on Facebook.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go a
Yeah.
little longer today. We're just gonna chop some stuff up
Yeah.
seriously. But the thing is, my son lost a friend at high school. Like a young lady. They were speeding, and and they said that she was allegedly was on social media or whatever, and they were speed and they went off the road, and I believe they hit a tree or whatever. But and since my son was in high school, he had relationships with all the news stations locally, and so all the news stations started reaching out to my son because it happened at his school, and people started treating my son a different kind of way because he did the newscast. He was like, yeah, sure, I do it. And he was talking because that's his friend. That's his friend in the classroom. They both people was, the young lady that was in the car with her, because the young lady was driving, lived, and the young lady that was on the passenger side passed away. And when he got to school, man, it was bad for him. I mean, they were at my son heavy.
Just curious, was he able to compose himself at the time that he had to do the newscast or whatever?
He really handled himself well. I was,
Wow.
I
At a
was
young
highly
age like that.
impressed.
Yeah.
The way that he handled himself. I mean, if he had a broke down, I mean, that's just natural. But he handled himself well. He did a fantastic job. I even believe CNN even reached out. I mean, it was a big story or whatever, but it was some big news stations was reaching out. And
That's dope.
he said, Dad, he said, man, they fussing at me. They mad at me. And I was like, what?
Who?
Friends
His peers?
at school, peers,
Oh.
because they, for whatever reason, but I'm just thinking from an adult.
Right.
They jealous of him because he got these relationships, and they might feel envy because of they thinking he getting the spotlight and trying to glorify the moment.
Yeah.
And this is his business. This
Right.
is his passion. This is
Right.
what he believes.
Right.
And so, believe it or not, he's gonna do a lot of this because that's the feeling.
Yeah.
But for whatever reasons, they were mad.
And I can imagine him being like,
He
if
was hurt.
anybody gonna tell this story, I want to be the one to tell the story.
He was heartbroken.
Because you know how the news can come out, especially when somebody is on the phone or something.
Yeah, he was heartbroken. Once again, one of those things, man. My wife and I brought him aside, rallied around him, poured at him, loved on him. Bro, you didn't do nothing wrong. You know what I mean? They the one. It's gonna be a whole lot of people that's gonna have problems with you in life. That's not your business. That's their business. And we just loved on him, and he said, well, Dad, I don't want to do another interview. I said, that's your personal beliefs, but make sure it's because you don't want to do it, not the pressure of someone else.
Right.
And he was like, I don't want to do it. I said, well, son, guess what? I'm Team Tariq. You know what I mean?
Back to letting him have his own grieving process, his own individual way. Joaquin, you rose up a little bit when Talik mentioned how people are finding out about death these days. What would you want to share about that?
Yeah, nah, man. I just it's one of those things where we're of a different generation.
Absolutely.
And so we're 50 years old. We do not believe that it is appropriate to share on Facebook that someone has passed away when it just happened. Like you ain't even had 30 minutes for family members to start making phone calls. And so I guess maybe that's something that we are going to have to adjust to. because I don't think we putting that, genie back in the bottle now, because there are times when people are finding out literally that close relatives of theirs have passed away, and they seeing it on Facebook as they scrolling.
Wow.
And so
Selfies and
what is the impact of that on your grieving process?
Yeah.
To discover this information that way, and how does that impact us?
That just
I think
augments that second piece of anger. I'm telling you, for some,
Yeah, right,
it
right.
probably does.
Yeah.
It
You
feels
start
like
out with
it's
anger.
disrespect. It's to me, like, in whatever generation we are in, death is something you're supposed to respect.
Right.
You're supposed to respect death, the passing away of a soul, right? And so, to me,
But we see it
speaks
as
to the deep.
disrespectful.
But no, I'm
Young
just
people
about.
don't.
I'm not talking about just we. I'm just talking about, to me, it's a fact of life that's like, it's certain things that no matter what generation you in, there should be some type of code of decorum attached to it, right? But no, I'm going to
Yeah.
I'm getting to
Right.
it's back to the desensitized. We're desensitized to it, so it doesn't matter that, they don't even know yet. You're not even thinking about it. And then the other thing that gets me is, as soon as somebody passes, you want to say, this is me and him last week. I just was with you. Is that for you, or is that to honor the death? Like, do you want us to know you were close to him? Well, what is it that you understand what I'm
Right.
saying?
Probably
Like,
guilt.
and sometimes they're not even really that close to the person.
That's why I
for
say
real.
guilt.
So yeah, it's but I'm with you
Yeah,
that
it's just, I think people just take it as an opportunity to shine the spotlight on themselves.
yeah.
Instead of honoring
The
that,
life.
and maybe that is honoring the person. I don't know, because you're saying, hey, I love this person. I had this relationship with this person. Maybe it is. What I don't want is for people to start feeling like individual news stations, where I got to be the first to report the news.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's how it comes.
Go ahead,
Don't,
John.
don't
Yeah.
do it. That's not
Yeah.
necessary. Listen, I'll say this to everybody. Don't you be the first person to put it on Facebook.
Right.
Don't you be the first person
Right.
to put it on social media.
Yeah.
Don't you be the first. It's not necessary.
Right.
I don't know if you feel like you have to be the first person. What type of clout are you chasing?
You just gotta tell
You
something.
don't you be the first person.
Hey,
If it's already up there, okay, you want to start putting your pictures, okay. Just don't you be the first person.
Jay-Z had a line on the 444 album. I don't remember which song, but he said something to the effect of something about, if I die, whatever, don't be putting pictures of us up like we was close and you won't even go by my mama's house. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
So a lot of these people, are you gonna go by the house
Yeah.
and sit with the mama and say, you know what you gave birth to meant something to me? Are you gonna take something to eat around there? If you're not gonna do all of that, then you stay out of what you posting to me. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Because that is about you then.
Yeah.
Because our first priority should be the family
Correct.
and those who are suffering. And
Hey, bro, especially again with the senseless violence, right? We're not talking about people living to their 80s and 90s and passing. If you have a child, right, please be a community to that child, whether it's your cousin, your niece, your nephew, that's needed so bad, and like you guys talked about, your father had an illness, right? And the village, right, stepped in. And so if these young men, again, that's these senseless killers recently, please have the village step in and nip it in the bud, you know what I'm saying? And try to end this cycle, because it affects generations, whether you realize it or not. Just like our grandfather was killed, right? He was killed. My grandmother had 3 kids between like 5, 7, and 9, something like that, right? Got remarried, had a couple kids, and that's it. Single grandma with 5 kids. Them 3 kids turned out to be teenage parents, and turned out to be all right in life, but it was still a challenge. It ain't the way you want to go about it, And so, it still affects us.
So what's your point though? Your point is people got to rally around that family to support the children.
Absolutely.
Got you.
Absolutely.
Got you.
That's the one thing we did get when we lost our father. Man, the fishing club and everybody was, wanting to do all kinds of stuff with me and my brother, and that meant something to us. Man. We'll never forget. It was a group called Seaville Anglers, and our dad was a fisherman. He was a part of that. And man, those old heads, they truly embraced us. Took me and my brother on some fishing trips after that.
And
Stuff
I
like
still
that,
love
man.
fishing.
Yeah, that was
Village,
real
man.
special
Real
to us, man.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
all the old dudes that was in that group, man, thank you guys. We really,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
really appreciated that, and that meant a lot to us.
Right.
You
right.
know,
I think the other thing, was you finished, John? I'm sorry.
Oh no. And I'm just agreeing and listening, and you
Okay.
know, rally around the kids, right? And we don't want to have a victim mentality, so to speak, forever. You know what I mean? You grieve, but then you grow and help build them young men and young daughters and show them some love because they vulnerable, right? Because you don't have a man to protect you. The mother loves you dearly and gonna protect you as best as you can. There's still nothing like having that man to protect you.
I think speaking about the village, right? I think what happened was, the older we got, they ran the village off, you know. And what I mean by that is, you know, don't say nothing to my kids while they walking down there. Let me correct them, you know. Don't, you know, and supporting wrong behavior, you know. And the village didn't accept that. Matter of fact, I ran into somebody yesterday, was part of the village, man, and you know, she just, you know, just I hadn't seen her since we was like little, you know, and you know, just that love is still there. That love is real. There's no phony, and we need to get back to the village, man.
Right.
We need just like all y'all. We got a village, right? We pour into our kids, you know. If there's something going on, we got our own village, but and we embrace people to pour into them and stuff like that. But a lot of people don't, you know, don't want nobody to say nothing to their babies, and they supporting bad behavior.
Let me ask y'all a question, man. This came up. You know, my wife was sharing with me a story about someone passed in someone's family, and it was one of the siblings, and they might have even been an adult, that said, "I'm not going to the funeral."
oh yeah,
Right?
that just happened.
And it's people, of course, that think that's the most disrespectful thing you can do. And I was like, you know, when my wife asked me what I thought about, I was kind of like, I'm back to everybody deals with death differently.
Right. Respecting that.
And what do y'all think about that? You know what I'm saying?
That just happened. That just happened for us.
Yeah.
Our Uncle Randy passed away, and we loved him dearly. Man, he was a big part of raising us. You know, when our father passed away and taking us fishing and doing all that stuff. But I didn't attend his funeral. I was on a cruise out of town, and but I did not feel bad about that, because at this age in my life, I realized that my grieving process is my grieving process. And I don't owe it to anyone else to justify or show up in any way. This is for me. You know, it's no different than people going to visit a gravesite. You know, when you go to visit that gravesite, that's for you.
Yeah.
But some people believe they're doing it for the person that is in the
Right,
grave.
right.
You know, and I've come to understand, you know, on a few occasions when I've gone to visit my father's gravesite or even my Uncle Randy's gravesite. When I went there, that was for me. That wasn't for nobody else.
Yeah.
And the same way I went to his gravesite for me is the same way I did not go to the funeral for me.
Yeah.
You know, that was for me.
Yeah.
And I think we all have to deal with these things on our own, and to go back to judging people. You know, we judge people. We think, you know, the good times example.
Right.
We think we know what's best for other people and how they should grieve.
Yeah.
And we need to stop that. My grandma, she's 93 years old. Shout out Granny.
Amen.
She will tell you in a pair of seconds, and my Uncle Randy is her son. She would tell you in a pair of seconds, look here, young fella, this world is for the living. This world is for the living. Don't be worried about nobody ain't here. All right? You'll get to experience them on the other side one day. But while you're here, you spend your time focused on the people that are here. And I think so many times we focus on what we've lost as opposed to what we still have.
Amen.
And that's what sends people into those spirals, You know, my little cousins, Kai, Maine, Miles, all them, they lost their father when they were young. And I feel like I call them my part-time kids.
Yeah.
You know, I help raise. And one of the things I would tell them, I was like, me and my brother lost our father at a young age. You don't have a patent on losing a parent.
Yeah.
Other people have lost a parent as well. You know,
Right.
and that when we show up at your games, I know you would love for your father to see you play football or play basketball or whatever. But it's 20 of us in the stands.
Yeah.
You know, it's 20 other family members in the stand.
Right.
You gonna cry because dad not here? You can, all right? But I want you to know it's 20 of us who are here as well supporting you. So it's all about what you choose to focus on. You
Yes,
know,
that's
that's
yeah.
no disrespect to your father. We loved him dearly. I miss him dearly. But you really have to focus on Granny's quote. This world is for the living.
For our Christian brothers and sisters, Jesus said, "Let the dead bury the dead."
Yeah, that's right.
You know, you're supposed to keep it moving.
And to reflect on, you know, when Wall was talking about Uncle Randy passing, I didn't attend the funeral. I was on a different cruise. You
Man,
know,
y'all, let's go on the cruise and got
But-
funerals going on. I know they talked about
Hey,
y'all.
the
Terrible.
Terrible.
They
Hey,
talked
look.
about y'all.
And real quick,
The
because of that now, and it makes more sense now because each time though with aunts, I wanted to pay my respects, man. Y'all was acting some kind of way, and I was like, man, why ain't these dudes let me know when arrangements are, especially with Uncle T, man.
They
I
wasn't even
was
going.
heated about that, man.
Oh,
I was
right.
like, yo,
You right. You
Right.
right. You right.
and I couldn't.
So-
I was reaching out to JG. Nobody was getting back with me, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
let that happen.
We
again,
owe you.
brother.
All right.
oh man, Plus that
Just see,
off
that's
camera.
back to just because y'all not going, James ain't free.
right.
Exactly. I want to show my respects,
Yeah,
man. I'm like,
yeah,
yo,
yeah,
these
yeah.
cats, man, what's going on?
But yeah, back to Unc, man. So I was on the cruise. But hey, like to your point, like, hey, we planned the cruise. We didn't know he was gonna pass. You know?
Right.
So, but guess what? Once again, man, I would have definitely been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't feel bad. Why? Because guess what? I drove from Atlanta to go see Unc. I went fishing with Unc. You know what I mean? I spent time with Unc.
Right.
You know, so that's demonstrating love. You
Our
know what I
relationship
mean?
was solid.
That's right. You know,
Yeah,
I think you feel bad when you ain't feel them shoes. And you got time to fill them shoes right now. It ain't too late.
When things may have been
Yeah,
left
it's like-
undone,
like, it's
certain
almost
things may have
like,
been left undone or whatever.
Me and his relationship, he knew I loved him.
That's
That's what
right.
everybody want
Right.
to know is I want they knew I loved. I didn't get to say this. I lived my life in a way where they knew that I loved them. And I wanted to say, man, before we get into some final thoughts, that when we talk about the deepest spiritual level, you know, and I teach my children anyway, you are, like in your father's case, you are your father.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying? If his DNA is in you, he lives through you.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So in that case, you know, you never losing anything. You know what I'm saying? Because the good memories, you know, the vessel has gone, right? That's the other thing. If we know that the real human being is a soul and a spirit, and this is just a house,
Yeah.
you can close your eyes and see your father's face.
Absolutely.
You can hear his voice. You can remember what he represents. You can talk to him because if you really knew him, you know what he would say.
Absolutely.
And those are the things to hold on
That's
to.
right.
You know what I'm saying? That's what
Right.
you hold on to.
Right.
And so forget the vessel. The vessel gone. The vessel getting old. The knees creaking. The vessel 100% is going to leave here.
Absolutely.
But that's not the real person.
That's right.
That the real person is that spirit that they
Spirit.
embody. Man. So,
Right.
And you know, really, we dealing with that right now in my family because my wife's mother, Miss Johnson, is dealing with dementia,
Yeah.
and Alzheimer's, and all that stuff. And it is, you really have to grieve them way before the body passes
Right.
because you know,
they gone.
right?
That
Exactly.
spirit gone. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah.
to deal with that, you know, no different than, you know, your experience with cousin Jeff.
Yeah.
You know, and dealing and because the person you know ain't there.
Yeah.
no more.
Yeah.
You know, and so you go through this grieving process, even though they're still alive, or the body is still here.
Yeah.
But because of that spiritual
Spirit.
piece and that soul piece, because
Yeah.
we know that's different, you know,
Yeah.
it's just a whole different
Yeah.
animal. And so how do you approach it when you know this moment is approaching?
It's coming.
But
Right.
but yeah, and so it's almost like you've already grieved the person, really.
Right. Right.
You really have.
And
That's a
I
good
want to
point
share.
to pre-grieve in a sense.
Yeah.
Start to
that's
go
a
through
good-
that process. You pass the denial stage. You pass
Yeah.
the anger stage. You pass the bargaining stage. You know, you may be the depression stage will kick in once they actually pass, and then you can get to
But
acceptance
to
later.
me, John said something about, I got you, Chalik. John said something about, that was the only funeral I went to that was a celebration. You can't get to the celebration unless you get to where you're talking about.
Right.
Because then you can really just smile and say, thank you for that
The
life.
acceptance, right?
You know what I'm
final thing,
saying?
acceptance.
You
Hey,
can't
yo.
even,
Yo,
yeah.
I, you know, they always say that when you lose someone, you know, one day when you see the picture, it won't be tears, it'll be laughs.
Yeah.
Man, I just had that moment this week.
Wow.
I was on my little cousin Kef. Shout out Kef Swag. Glad you home, brother. I was on his page and I was scrolling down his page and I saw a video of my Uncle Tommy. And it was a picture of my Uncle Tommy, and he was in a wheelchair, but he was still trying to be young. And he stand up, he almost fall down. He started trying to dance and all that stuff. His body is being ravaged by cancer, but he laughing, he trying to do the stinky leg and all this stuff. It's so funny. And when I watched that video, man, I was just laughing hysterically.
Yeah.
You know, that was my moment when I realized, yo, I don't see his picture in sadness anymore.
Yeah.
I can see him and just totally laugh and think about the man he was and what he meant for our
his
family.
life represented.
Yeah, exactly.
Chalik, where you gonna go, bro?
Now I meant to hit on a point when I was talking about I wasn't able to come to Uncle Randy's funeral, but my son, he didn't go on the cruise with my wife and I. And he showed up big, you know what I mean? He represented our family and stuff. And, you know, they even asked him to speak, you know, as well. So just very proud of just some of the stuff you put in your children and then to be able to see them demonstrate a level of responsibility.
A moment you couldn't even prepare him for.
Absolutely.
I want to say this. To all of the older people, please understand when moments of death happen and you have to have these conversations, just know that there are a lot of young people who are watching you, and how you demonstrate and exhibit and go through this process, you're teaching them how to go through it as well.
Right.
And you're becoming the example for them. And it has a tremendous impact on how they handle death moving forward in life. They're watching you.
Right.
And so just remember that.
Oh no, I don't even say this out loud, but I'm just gonna say it. You know, my oldest is not my biological, right? And a lot of people know that.
Right.
But his biological was killed as well. And so I think it's crazy how the spirit, we talk about our grandfather being killed. And I'm just trying to be there for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah. James, any final thoughts, bro?
No, I think it's just, you know, as like you said, as somber as it was, I think it was very enlightening. Hopefully it'll help, you know, anyone that tunes into the podcast.
Hey man,
I think
I want you to talk about the lesson. You know what I mean? And I think it's beautiful when someone, you know, when we make it to 80, 90 years old and pass. And we talked earlier about losing Ron. And then I don't know at that time did we know, but the lesson in that, you know what I mean? So what is the lesson in these senseless murders, the UVA tragedy, you know, and again, more concerned within our own community?
To me, the lesson is always about, this life is all about relationships. And at the end of the day, when we get the chance to reflect on our life, we will talk about and we will cherish the great relationships that we had, and we will lament the relationships we wish were better. That's what this life is all about. It's all about relationships for me. And so thank God for the great relationships. And the message I want anybody to take from this, if you have any relationships out there in this world that are not as good as you would want them to be,
That's right.
you still have an opportunity to go fix them and to go fix it. And put your ego aside, put all of that nonsense aside, all of that pettiness, all of that silly stuff, put that aside and go fix that relationship with your mother. Put that aside and go fix that relationship with your brother. Put that aside and go fix that relationship with your children. All of this is a bunch of nonsense.
That's
and
right.
we get a chance to live this life. That's what matters. Relationships. That's all that matters is relationships.
Because the ultimate lesson is you not promised anything.
That's right.
You ain't promised to wake up tomorrow. So valuing every moment, every day is the lesson, and respecting that.
And I'm going for the ultimate thing is good and faithful servant. You know, because hey, while I'm here, I'm supposed to serve, and that may be a word of encouragement to someone. That may be, you know, it can show up in many different ways. But that's the ultimate thing: good and faithful servant. And if you do that, then you won't move through life with regrets.
I think that's powerful, and I would be remiss as we wrap up if I didn't say this, because I know all of y'all agree. We could do a whole nother episode on it. When our family members pass, stop arguing about the funeral arrangements.
Come on.
Stop arguing about the money. Stop arguing about he didn't want it this way and want it that way.
Yep.
And let whoever happens to be legally in charge understand they're doing the best they can. And it's not your job to get in your feelings and cause problems with the family that lead to people not speaking and not valuing the life that was just lost.
Right.
And with that, and I know y'all can stamp that, we could go on and on about that. But with that, I'm going to ask Joaquin to take us out from the B2M Podcast Crew in this episode about death. Glad you all could join us here from the Code Building. But Joaquin, how you going to take us out on this one, man?
In the words of the great Frederick Douglass, it is easier to raise strong children than to repair broken men.
Yeah,
Peace.
we out of
Let's
here.
get it.